Hello, I'm Ben. Welcome to the channel. So today we're going to talk about a few things that are, I'd say around 15 or 16 uncomfortable things that employers act poorly on or don't really think through when they're in the midst of these items. And as an entrepreneur, managing your business properly may mean that you have to navigate these waters properly because they may be a greater threat to you than anything else. So let's get into it and let's discuss these topics. It should be a fairly quick video, hopefully, but let's get right in. The first one is the worst time to offer someone a pay raise or promotion is when they hand in their notice. I've seen this happen many times. I've worked for a company before that was their primary way of offering people a raise or something like that. And you saw typically, I always say you want to have some history at a place that's 2 or 3 years. You saw in history of payment with pay or regards to pay rather, where someone that has jumped every 2 years was making far more money than someone who had stayed and worked there for the last 10 to 15 years. So you would see that continual pattern of people being appreciated more when they were jumping for a job because people were hiring based on an urgent need and they paid that person more. So what people don't think about is the cost of hiring new employees. You have the cost of recruiting, the cost of training, the cost of salary and benefits, of course, reaching the break-even point. So the employee has to last long enough to pay for all that I just mentioned. And you want to know how much it costs. Well, when you look through that online, the cost of training, it says 22 to 23 rather, according to a recent study by Training Magazine's, companies spent over $101.8 billion on training new and current employees in 22 and 23. That figure includes training budgets, technology spending, and staff salaries. The average training costs per employee across the United States from 2015 to 2023 for small businesses, it was over $1,200 per employee. Training for mid-sized companies runs about $600. For large companies runs about $400 because on volume, all companies together averaged out around $700. The cost of salary and benefits obviously taken on the employees. Their salary comes with its own bundle of side items. Benefits range from the minor things such as free coffee in the employee break room to major things such as life insurance, benefits, coverages, and stock ownership or equity options. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says that about 30% of a person's salary come in these exemplary items. Reaching the break-even point is what most employers don't focus on or don't think about. The goal of this investment is increased productivity, but it can take time for companies to see a return on their investment, which is hiring these new employees. A survey of 210 CEOs by Harvard Business School estimated that typical mid-level managers require 6 months to reach their break-even point. In other words, the manager has to be in a job for more than 6 months for the company to start recouping its investment in them and getting a benefit from that. Bliss breaks down the productivity scale into these two periods. Roughly the first month after training is completed, new employees are functioning at about 25% productivity, which means it costs a lot of productivity, roughly 75% of the employee's salary. Week 5 through 8, the level goes up to 50% productivity, corresponding to 50% lost in the salary. Weeks 9 through 12, in this time frame, the employee will usually reach productivity rate of up to 75%, with the cost being 25% of the employee's salary. Following 12-week mark, companies can expect a new hire to reach full productivity. But remember, this is for roughly the first month is what they're saying. If you have training before you could actually do the job, which many companies do, this productivity period and this scale doesn't start until after that period is done. So how much does it cost to hire a new employee? Hiring a new employee costs more than just their salary, benefits, and other compensation, such as retirement contributions, etc. Considerable time investment by employers is made in hiring someone. Hiring firms and those type things also cost additional monies. The bottom line here is that hiring a new employee is a decision that should be taken lightly. It doesn't fall lightly on the company budget. Without workers, there isn't much work being done, so even with the investment to make the company account cringe, the potential return on a good new hire continues to be an investment that is worthwhile. The risk, though, far outweighs the reward if you're not in a situation where you have a culture where a new employee is going to be valued and appreciated. Next thing is, if you don't have a work from home issue, you have a trust problem. Saying if you don't allow people to work from home, that you have a trust issue, you don't trust your employees. Number 3 was, people don't just quit jobs, they quit bad managers. I think it's the most overquoted piece of nonsense out there. Here's the point. If you're promoting bad people to bad positions, you deserve what you get. Okay, that means you're going to have turnover. If you look at your company and you look at all the employees that work for you and think about how long they've been there. Now think about what we just said about investments per employee, but think about this also. How long has each teammate been there? If you have 100% turnover in a 3-year period of time, that's a problem. That means you have a culture issue and you have a leadership issue. If you're having turnover that is any greater than the national averages, you have a major problem. So you want to look at that. To be a great employer, to be a great place to work, your entire team should have tenure that's decent and prolonged. A company culture is not beanbags, free beer, or free subscription to a medication app. That's basically saying what I just said about your culture. You want your culture to be something that truly is beneficial to you and your teams, where you do have an environment that pushes psychological safety and affirmation. I'm not talking about the equity nonsense. I'm saying you create a place where people can bring them whole selves and throw down. You're not making accommodations for folks outside of the effort they put forth in work. Okay? The next one is, if your team doesn't feel comfortable to say, I don't know, or I disagree, you have a lot of work to do. That goes back to the psychological safety I just mentioned. If you're not paying people what they're worth, others will. That is a fact. Here's the point. At some point, you have to understand what the value these people bring is worth, right? And you need to pay that. You want to keep the right person. When the best people that know a lot and have been fixing problems for years, that know how to do things because they're doers, when those people go away, you will never recover that. Okay, you've just lost something that was not something you should have considered losing. So just understand that that does happen. I remember I left the company one time after a decade of service, and I thought as I was walking out the door, these people have no idea how much is in my head. They're not going to be able to replicate what I've done because I'm walking out with everything that's needed. It's my head and the way I did things, the way I organized the culture, the way I supported the teams that made the impactful difference. And the company was not bright enough to know that they needed to sustain that. Well, they were. Basically, they could get 2 others for cheaper than I, but neither one of them knew how to do anything. So basically, a lot of those things that we were sustaining were then put off to third parties because the company could no longer do it. It was people like me that made the things work. The next is, employees have 4 times better engagement when they receive consistent feedback. Guys, I say it all the time, do weekly one-on-ones with your team. If your team is more than 40 people and you can't do weekly, do bi-weekly. Everyone deserves that constant, consistent feedback. If you're given that feedback, then you can celebrate the small wins. You can have those wins, which then will create more wins. But the worst thing is, if you have bad feedback, you're giving the employee frequent updates on how they're doing and how they're improving. It's that 20-70-10 rule, right? 20% are superstars. They do everything and more. 70% are the salt of the earth. They come in and do what you pay them for. Not necessarily any more, not necessarily any less, but they're good people you can count on. They show up every day and do what's expected. And 10%, you should be actively willing to coach up or coach out. So if you're doing those things and you're providing that feedback often, you're going to have 4 times better engagement and 4 times better empowerment, because the people aren't going to misunderstand anything. They're going to know what's expected, and they're going to know what they're expected to do daily to take care of those things in bite-sized chunks. Next one is, micromanagement never means hard work. It means lack of freedom. Micromanagement to me is the most repulsive thing you can do to a team. I've mentioned on here before, I worked for a company that was very, very intelligent. They hired some of the smartest people I've ever met. I was on one of the smartest teams I've probably ever been on, and they were micromanaged down to the point of how they submitted their items. It was absolutely repulsive. That manager was toxic and since then was fired, but how many leaders did you have to lose before you do that? I mean, I know I counted of 20 that were turned over during that person's time during my tenure with that organization, and I'll tell you, every last one of those people were a rock star, and they could have made an incredible impact on the company and the customers and those people that the company supported. But instead, one person, one toxic piece of waste, was allowed to make their lives absolutely miserable and run them off, question every decision they made, force that leader's own opinions on things, and then that leader wanted to then review them annually on how their performance was when it was that person that was making all the decisions. It was repulsive. It was an abusive situation. The company should be ashamed. That's all I'll say about that. It's just repulsive. You go and you have your work history, you have your education, you have your training, you do all these things, you stack this pile of resume and experience, and you go to a company where they say, come here, we need you, come do all this and help our customers and do all you can. And you go with that expectation, and then there's some troll on the bridge that will not let you do anything the way you know it should be done. Why? Not because it's your opinion, because of your experience and education, and this person will not get out of the way. It is repulsive. Companies that allow that deserve exactly what they get, and what they get is all their people leave and go elsewhere and thrive elsewhere because they're not in a position where they're not being limited to how they can handle things. Next is, if your entry-level job advert requires real experience, then it's not an entry-level job. It's a normal job paying entry-level salary and for an experienced worker. I think that's more pandering. It's simple. Have the work description, have the scope of work, make sure that's clear and understood, and if someone's qualified to do that, hire them to do it. Look at their resume, look at their history, look at their abilities to do those things. An entry-level job has certain requirements, so there should be proof to those requirements. That may be that they can speak in public, it may be that they have certain administrative talents, whatever that may be. There's other ways to prove that than just prior work experience. Like if they were, supervised a club or something like that in the past, they'll have some experience, and then you work them in that role for 90 days and a trial period. And if it goes well, then there you go. You make a good hire and you go from there. If it goes poorly, they failed that trial period, and you go with your second choice. In every position you hire, you should have 3 choices. You should try to start getting the first. If you can't, you try to get the second. And if you can't, you try to get the third. And if that's the case and you don't like the third is not really to what you need, then start the process over, recruit differently, use different words, and see if you can't do better the next time. If the actions of the company leaders do not align with the values, any trust will be destroyed. That's an absolute fact. Worked at a company one time where a young lady was the president of the company. Her family were a bunch of missionaries. Her husband was a missionary, and she ended up getting caught messing around with one of her subordinates. So, of course, all of her credibility was shot. She destroyed her career. She destroyed her family. I think she and that person ended up getting married at one point, but at that point, what does it matter? You didn't respect the last marriage, so taking someone's name, what does that even matter? So it does destroy any vision or trust that you have in that person. Just know that that's always the way that plays out as well. Next one, if you're sick, you need to go to medical appointment. Your child is sick, you should not count it as annual leave. I don't know what that's all about. You have sick days. When you take a job, talk about the vacation time, your leave time, and your sick time. Anytime your child is sick or you're sick, that should count as sick leave. You shouldn't have endless days of days off, guys. If you work a job, there should be something that you agree upon in your compensation package that you go with, and you shouldn't dance and complain when you use those days. The expectation should be, in a normal year, you only need this many days, and the rest, hopefully, you get bought back. If you don't use your vacation, if you don't use your leave days, hopefully they pay you for those days at the end of the year. That would be the best case situation. Then you can consume whatever you need, and if you don't consume it, you get paid for it. That way, it truly is a benefit. That would be an actual great way to do that. When you look after your team will look after your clients. I agree with that. Happy teams take care of their customers. If you have a team that is happy and that you're spoiling and they're not taking care of your customers, you need to look at your team. That doesn't mean they're good. Parasites are parasites. Parasites get fat and happy when you leave them alone. Okay? But parasites will make the organization sick, just like they'll make an animal sick. So if you have a parasite, you need to know what that is. You need to separate that from yourself and get that handled. Otherwise, if you take care of your team, they have a place where they're held to an expectation, the expectation is communicated regularly, and they're paid appropriately and appreciated for what they're doing. They have that psychological safety. You're creating a great work environment for a team, a great work environment. Never expect your new employees to hit the ground running if you aren't providing a fantastic onboarding program. I agree with that to a point. Your onboarding program should be fantastic. It should be lined out for 3 weeks. Every single day of what that teammate's going to be doing on those days should be lined out so they come in and they know, today I'm going to do this, today I'm going to do that. They should learn those things, but they should be able to hit the ground running in a capacity that they have the professional experience that allowed them to be correct for this role. So certain things they should be able to pick up and carry very quickly, with the rest being job specific or training specific around that job. Fastest way to kill a company culture is let a bad behavior be tolerated and rewarded. I agree with that. The best way to lose good people is to keep the bad ones. That's a fact. Anybody that brings noise is possibly a bad employee. Okay, people like to be in a place where it's safe and normal and calm. If you can't create that for people, you're not going to get people to stay. Okay, You have to have everybody live by the same rules. If you have a heavy hitter and you don't hold them to the rules, that will make people leave. You can't lose credibility. You have to be a stickler for your rules. You have to be a stickler for your communication. You have to have an expectation around behavior, and you don't tolerate bad behavior no matter what it does. Even if your top producer has the worst attitude on the planet, then you need to fire that one. It's better to have 2 good producers that do well than 1 superstar that's an ass to everybody. Or a jerk at work, as that book says. Next one, it'll cost you considerably more to replace someone than it would to pay them what they are worth originally. I think I've worn that out. I think that's definitely something that people should consider. I don't think that is something that anyone should have any concerns about. Hopefully this video helps. I think that in the long run, building a proper team that you take time building should be sustained and supported through your leadership actions, okay? That means regular communication. You don't look at them as a burden. You don't roll your eyes when they want to talk to you or any of that jazz. You should be doing the things that matter to try to help that team and that teammate. This is useful to you. Please pay attention to these things, especially if you're self-employed, because if you want to kill a business, getting this wrong will kill your business quicker than anything else, okay? Having a bad culture, having 100% turnover every 2 to 3 years is awful. It's atrocious. It means you're not taking the steps to move forward. Your quality control will be out of whack. Your customer care will be out of whack. You're not going to be able to do things to support your company or your customers the way you expect to. So make sure you have these things in place. There's tons of videos on this channel that talk about all these different items around leadership, coaching, and running a business. So feel free to take a look at the catalog and find what makes the most sense. That's all for today. I'm Ben. Please like, please subscribe. Be good.